Hello, I'm Micki Pistorius, author, profiler, and psychologist. Now, detectives can be commended for investigating and arresting serial killers. However, there are some historical cases where the system failed the community and innocent people died because the serial killers were deemed too young and received leniency in their sentences. We all know Jeffrey Dahmer, and in 1989, at the age of 28, Jeffrey Dahmer was charged with being in possession of undesired material depicting underage children. The psychologist in the case said that he suffered from a schizoid personality disorder and that he was very manipulative. Now, Dahmer's lawyer said the following. He said, "We don't have a multiple offender here. I believe he was caught before the point of no return, where it could have gotten worse, which means that this is a blessing in disguise." Now, unbeknown to the lawyer, by this time, Dahmer had already killed 5 people. Okay, so Dahmer was sentenced to a year imprisonment, but he was allowed to go out and to go and work. So during his period of 5 years of probation, his probation officer's intuition told him that something was wrong. But the neighborhood that Dahmer was living in was deemed so dangerous that the probation officer didn't go to his home to make any inspections. So on the 26th of May in 1991, a young underage boy, Conorak Synthasamphone, was found naked and bleeding in the streets outside, and the police attended to them. And Dahmer casually strolled out and convinced the police that the child was in his custody, and the police even accompanied him back to Dahmer's apartment. A few hours later, Conorak was dead. So, the next month, Dahmer was apprehended. Now, we need to ask the question, was the defense lawyer, the probation officer and the policeman, did they fail the system due to negligence or due to ignorance? So a month after, Dahmer was arrested, and then it turned out that he had already committed his first murder at the age of 18. He killed for another 13 years, unabated. He was eventually found guilty on the murder of 16 people, and he had 16 life sentences in 1992, and he died in prison later. Ed Kemper was another American serial killer who started his career at 15 when he killed his grandparents. And he was sent to an institution for juveniles, and then he was released into the custody of his mother. Then he proceeded to kill 6 women, including his mother and her friend. In 1984, in South Africa, Jan Abraham Christoffel Nell, we'll just call him Chris, who had failed grade 9 and completed a year in the army, returned to his hometown of Postmasburg in the Northern Cape. He, as an 18-year-old man, he worked as a driver for the railways, and he lived in the railways hostel. He was a loner. So one night, on the evening of the 3rd of November in 1984, he attended a disco in the local showgrounds. A friend of his, a colleague of his, gave him his keys, which had a little pocket knife attached to that. Chris asked several of the girls at the disco to dance with him, and they refused. And this reminded him of his girlfriend that broke up with him a few months earlier. And when he was a child, his mother put him in a hostel, and she made no objections when at 16 he said he was going to run away to his grandmother. So on that night, at about 11 o'clock, Chris went outside to relieve himself, and he saw 2 teenage girls entering the ladies' toilets, and he followed them. He later admitted that at that moment he knew he was going to kill them. So, 15-year-old Miss Rika Fischer and 17-year-old Miss S were standing in the toilets combing their hair. And in the reflection of the mirror, they saw the man came in and he was raising the knife. So they screamed, and Miss S tried to pull Rika into the toilet cubicle, but she couldn't, and she locked the door, and Rika was outside, and she heard Chris tell Rika to take off her clothes, and Rika refused. And then she heard them struggle, and she heard gurgling noises as well, and then quiet. and she stood on the toilet and she peeked over the wall and she saw Rika lying in a pool of blood with multiple stab wounds. And she looked up and Chris was washing his hands and he watched her in the mirror and he smiled at her. And she tried to run away, but he caught her and he dragged her to the stables, where she pleaded for her life, but he told her that he hated women, and she said maybe his girlfriend didn't love him, and that infuriated her, so he raped her brutally. Then as she bent to pick up her clothing, she ran outside, and he followed her and he tackled her. And at that moment, the lights of a car shone on them, and Miss S was saved, and she was taken to the police station, and Chris hid in the stables. So at the police station, she told them what had happened, and they returned and they found Chris at the stables, and they also found the body of Rika Fischer in the ladies' toilet. Chris then told the police officer that Major Louis Swanepoel that he saw the girl running and he tried to comfort her, and that was his story. However, they found the body and Miss S had already made her statement. So, in June 1986, Justice Passon did not give Chris the death sentence due to his young age, because at that stage he was 20. He did sentence him to 20 years in prison, and he admonished him to use the time to rehabilitate himself and not to bear a grudge against society. So Chris was in prison for 12 years. He did not rehabilitate himself, and he nourished his grudge against women. So in January 1997, he was released on parole, and he went to the town of Uppington, also the Northern Cape, where he was a mechanic, and he lived in a little garden flat. He didn't date, and he went out sometimes with his colleagues. Now, the ladies of the night were plying their trade not far from his work environment. So on the 10th of November in 1997, 18-year-old scholar Hermine Maastorp was attending a disco, and she told her friend she's going to go home at about 1 o'clock and she would catch a lift, somebody would give a lift home. So the next morning, her body was found outside in the Eretveld, outside Uppington, and she'd been raped, and she was killed with a blunt object, and she had multiple injuries to her head. And swabs were taken, and a DNA profile was identified here. Then in December 1997, 22-year-old Belinda Visagie, who was a lady of the night, accompanied Chris, and the ladies of the night later said that Chris was a regular client of theirs, but he was called Johan. So they went out into the Eretveld and they had consenting sex, but then Chris requested a deed that she didn't want to comply with, and he was infuriated and he attacked her and he hit her in the head with a blunt object. She managed to escape and run away, and he left. But she was alive, and she went back, and she got a lift back, and she went to a medical examiner who confirmed her injuries, but she did not report the case to the police. And then on the 18th of March in 1998, Chris and his colleagues went to a pub, but Chris got separated and he went back to the ladies of the night, and he picked up a woman called Janetta Menkes. Now, the other ladies warned her not to go with Chris because what had happened to Belinda, but she went with him in any case. So the next day, her body was found not far from when Belinda was assaulted, and her head was bashed in to such an extent that her jaw had been dislocated into her throat, and she suffocated from that enormous blow. And then she was identified by her friends, and Sergeant Chris Visser of the murder and robbery squad arrested Chris on the 23rd of March 1999. Okay, and his DNA matched with that was found of Hermine Maastorp. So in July, he was charged and he was brought on the attempted rape of Belinda and the attempted murder of Belinda and Hermine Maastorp and Janetta Menkes. And Advocate Johan de Nijssen was the state prosecutor, and he called me in to testify in this case. Chris did not plead guilty to the cases. However, he did not deny my testimony, and he was found guilty and was sentenced to life. So, what if he ever gets out? The last time that he was out on parole, it took him 11 months before he started again, more brutally. So this reminds me of another case in May 1971 in South Africa, where a 20-year-old man called William van der Merwe was found guilty of 2 attempted assaults and 2 attempted rapes. And due to his young age, he was only given a suspended sentence. So a few months later, in November 1971, William, alias Screwdriver, van der Merwe raped 9 women, including a 14-year-old girl. And she was gagged and threatened with a screwdriver, thus his moniker, William Screwdriver van der Merwe. He was sent to the Sterkfontein Hospital and he was found fit to stand trial. And then Justice Steyn said the following. He said, "This is one of the grimmest cases of rape that I've known in 15 years on the bench. A young and very attractive girl, a virgin, until she was ravaged by van der Merwe. This is the kind of person I am going to protect." So on the 22nd of March 1972, he was given the death sentence, which was then subsequently turned into a 20-year-old life sentence. Okay, so there is Chris with his life sentence, and he spent 15 years in prison, and where he attended a rehabilitation program at the Zonderwater Prison Hospital, and then eventually in 1987 he was found cured and rehabilitated and released on parole. 2 years later, in 1989, 2 girls were hitchhiking near Muizenberg in the Cape and picked up by Screwdriver van der Merwe. And he took them to a forest where, unbeknown to them, he had 3 pairs of handcuffs and 29 screwdrivers in the back of his vehicle. So he took him to the Constantia forest where he raped one of the girls, and then he offered them cigarettes, told them that he wouldn't hurt them. Then he drove out to another forest near Grabo, and there he tied up the girl that he'd already raped. He tied up her feet and he handcuffed her, and he undressed himself and took the other girl into the forest. And in the meantime, the girl that was tied up, she found his pants, and in the pants she found his firearm. So when he returned naked from the forest with a bloody knife in his hand, she shot him in the head and in the shoulder. And she managed to untie her feet, and she went to the road and she stopped a vehicle and she was taken to the police. So when they returned to the scene of the crime, they found Screwdriver van der Merwe. He was unconscious, and they found the body of the other girl, and she was dead. Okay, so in these 3 cases of Jeffrey Dahmer, Ed Kemper, Nell, and van der Merwe, these murderers receive leniency due to their young age. And despite being given life sentences, they were still released on parole. And a few months later, they all killed brutally again. So the high-profile case of van der Merwe, this led to amendments to the Criminal Procedures Act of South Africa of 1993, after the recommendations of the Boysens Commission. And these sections says Section 286A and Section 286B state that if the court is satisfied that the person represents a danger to the physical or the mental well-being of others, and if the community should be protected against him or her, then the court must declare the individual a dangerous criminal. This is what the Act says. So, in South Africa, the death sentence is 25 years. With good behavior, it could be reduced about a third, and after half about that, the people can apply for parole. Now, in 1998, Judge Chris Jansen sentenced Stuart Wilkert, South Africa's cannibal killer, to 7 life sentences, and he said he would have given him the death sentence if that was available to him. Clearly, Justice Jansen did not intend for Stuart to get out of prison ever again. Yet currently, he's again applying for parole. Should the community not be protected against this dangerous criminal? If you find these videos interesting, then please give us your thumbs up, share them, and subscribe to Micki Pistorius Profiler on Record for more weekly interesting videos. Thank you.